were in the room early, and we've been praying and looking forward to this session. And saw a little bit of everyone in the room, from people who want to get involved in the movies to people who are making movies, people who are involved in music and every other aspect. So I'm excited about our time together today. First and foremost, I want to say to you, I'm usually in our team at Kendrick Brothers Productions, Sherwood Pictures. I'm the person behind the curtain, working, like you see the duck paddling a lot of times. Hard at work, but never seen. And so in that, today I want you to know that I'm going to be at a very high level because there's so many details as it regards to legal and production. But I'm here all week. I'll be somewhere around the room, and I love to drink coffee and love to sit with you and help you in any way I can. I look at what I do in the movie business is helping people connect with people and helping people be good stewards of the work that the Lord's called and placed on their heart. So I'm more than willing to help you in any way possible on any topic. So feel free to just stop me at any point you see me during the week, and we can talk further. But first, I'd like for you to join me as we go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that you've given me in this journey to be a part of what's happening in Christian film. And Lord, as I talk about my story and the story of Sherwood Pictures and film today, Lord, I just want to acknowledge up front that if there's been any good thing, any perfect thing, it's because you guided and led us in that activity. And so, Lord, you get all the glory for everything that's happened in the films that have been produced here in this place, and I just thank you for that. I pray you guide our time together today in the presentation and the Q&A, that if there's questions in this room that need to be answered, and if there's things that need to be placed on people's heart and guidance for any of us today, Lord, that would come from your Holy Spirit. And Lord, we love you, and we thank you for this time and opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I thought I'd start off and just tell you a little bit about myself and how I came through an unusual path to be involved in Christian film. My family started a carnival business, not like elephants and those kind of things, circus type thing, but carnival. So think merry-go-round, Ferris wheel, that kind of carnival in 1933. So when I was born, that was the family business, and I was put into that business at an early age. At 7, I had my first full-time job, and I was making $120 a week, working with my uncles in that business. At 9, my uncle, we had a circuit we ran. We would start the year in Bridgeport, Connecticut, right at the coast, and we would go down the East Coast till we got to Miami around October, and then we'd put everything on barges and go to either Caracas, Venezuela, or San Juan, Puerto Rico, and play El Festival for 30 days, come back and repeat. And so at 9, when I showed up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, my uncle introduced me to an ice cream business that he had bought for me, and he told me, starting here at 9, you've got to hire your own help, fire your own help, buy your own stock, run this business. All I'm going to do is drive you the business from one place to the next each week. And so, and he was very good about making sure that I had to make every one of the decisions. He didn't make them for me. And at 9, when you start hiring and firing people, pretty much everybody's older than you are. So it helped me a lot with learning people skills, how to work with people, how to do business. I stayed in that business from 9 until I was 18. In 18, I decided to go a different direction than what the rest of my family was doing. I joined the United States Marine Corps. I was there for 6 years in the Marine Corps. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I started managing a cable TV company. I think a lot of those skills that my uncle instilled in me in the carnival helped me to be successful in everything that I went into after that. So I was managing this cable TV company in the 80s, did that for 4 years, and then left there and went to work for the Coca-Cola company. I worked for the Coke company for 15 years, there managing distribution centers. It was in Coke that God radically got a hold of my life, and I went to a church one Sunday out of the blue, hadn't been in a long time, and I went to church that Sunday and the pastor said, "It's Super Bowl Sunday. Whose team are you quarterbacking, God's or Satan's? Are you leading people to heaven or to hell with your actions? It doesn't matter whether you're the CEO of the company or a sweeper, somebody, your friends, your family, your coworkers, somebody is looking up to you, and they're saying, if I want to be successful, I need to do what Bill does. I need to be like Bill. I need to act like Bill." And I knew in that moment that I was like Bill, but I was leading people straight to hell. And so I gave my life to Christ that week, and God set me on a totally different course and when he saved my life. And I stayed with Coca-Cola for about another 7 years after that. They brought me here to Albany, Georgia to manage the facility here in Albany and one over in Tifton. And so that brought me to this church in 1994, and the Lord called me into ministry here in the year 2000. So I've been the executive pastor here at the church for 22 years, and that was what led me to this church, got me involved in this church. In the church itself, I handle all the finances, supervise all the staff, and am chairman of the different boards of like our pregnancy centers and our Christian schools and those kind of things. And so in there, in the early 2000s, we had 2 guys on our staff, Alex and Stephen Kendrick. If you heard in the earlier session how the Lord placed on their heart early age, they were making movies, they were desiring to make Christian films. And in the early 2000s, the 2 of them, myself and the senior pastor here, began making films. They were the first one Stephen talked about this morning, Flywheel. For us, it was going to just be an Easter message that was going to be, we might show it here in the church. And then we thought, well, maybe in the local theater. And so when they went to the local theater with Flywheel, they said, well, we don't show homemade movies here in our church. In our theater. And so Alex asked to speak to the head people for the local theater. And they said, well, maybe it would be a good thing to do just for community goodwill. So we'll do it, and we'll split the box office with you. So it premiered on that Friday, as Stephen talked about earlier. And that first weekend, it outsold every Hollywood movie in the theater. They said, can you stay? So that went week 1. Eventually, that was 6 weeks later. But if you heard Stephen in the earlier message, he was talking about how we carried a projector to make sure that we could show it in the theater. Well, that meant somebody had to be up there at the beginning of every show to push the button to start. And so we knew that that was not scalable, that we could keep going to different places and pushing the button every showtime. And so we did play in another local theater, but after that, we went into a season of prayer for what would come after Flywheel. Just because God does something one way, one time, doesn't mean that he's going to be automatically do it again. So we were praying, should we make a second movie? And if so, what would that look like? And obviously, if you've seen Flywheel, as Stephen shared in an earlier message, there were lots of opportunities for production quality in Flywheel. And so we're praying about those. How do we improve production quality with the next project? Because in that season of prayer, we really believed that God was going to open the door for that movie to go and to be a theatrical release. So during that season of prayer, a gentleman showed up here to church one day, and he had a big black notebook, and he asked if he could speak with Alex. And so he got up in there in the office with Alex up here on this side of the church, and he opened it up, and there he was putting makeup on Sylvester Stallone and on James Earl Jones and others. And Alex asked him, what is this? And he said, I was a Hollywood makeup man for 10 years, and I gave my life to Christ, And I left Hollywood, and I came here to Albany, and I'm managing a Dollar General store over in the east side of town. And I saw Flywheel in the theater, and I said, God, could you use me again to my gifts for your glory? And so he said, I want to volunteer just like everybody in your church and to be a part of what y'all are doing with Christian film. And God brought us a Hollywood makeup man through a Dollar General store because we were praying and asking him to do the impossible. And so there were just several things like that along the way that we began to see God's favor going before us. One of the best things early on at a film festival, just like this, we met a gentleman named Larry Frenzy. Larry's an entertainment attorney in LA. We met him at a film festival and began to start working with him because we knew we needed legal representation as we went out and saw other people about how we might get distribution. It wasn't long after we finished Facing the Giants and we're in post-production, and we get a call, and we have a major studio in California that wanted to fly Alex and Stephen, myself, and the pastor out for a meeting. We go out there to the meeting, and we're thinking this is the answer to the prayers that we've been praying. This is going to be distribution. And we go out there, and they take us all over, show us the whole studio, show us where many movies have been filmed over the years. And then they brought us back into a little room for lunch, and they said, guys, we are really excited about this movie, and we want to handle distribution. We want to put it on DVD, and we want to put it all over the world. And then, for a little church who's just been selling some DVDs of Flywheel, they said, and we want to give you an advance of $250,000, because that you can use to go back to Atlanta and put your movie in about 12, 15 theaters. And so we left there. That wasn't quite what the Lord was telling us was going to happen in being in theaters. We went back to the hotel. We met with someone who could have done the distribution there in Atlanta. But while we were still together in Los Angeles and praying about it, we really felt like that if God told us he was going to put the movie in theaters, we could trust him. And that it wouldn't be that we'd get an advance that we'd then go try to roll it up the hill ourselves and put it into theaters. So we told him thanks, but no thanks, and walked away. Came back here, had meetings that we continued in prayer with tears, like, Lord, what's happening? You know, this isn't what we thought was going to happen. And then Stephen had been working on an element in post-production where we had one song by the group Third Day that we wanted to have in the movie, but we knew we needed to license it. So Stephen, if you know Stephen, he can, like a dog on a bone, he keeps staying after it. So he's calling them, they won't call him back. So finally he gets a hold of the assistant for the president of Prophet Films, or within Prophet Music. He gets a hold of the assistant, and she said, well, yes, we've heard about it, but the president says that churches don't make movies, and if they do, I don't want to see them unless let's have our music in them. And so that was their response, but Stephen didn't give up, and Stephen said, well, could you get him to just watch 15 minutes over lunch? And so they agreed. He started watching 15 minutes. Then he said, can you cancel my next meeting? He watched 30 minutes. Then he kept canceling meetings and watched the entire film. At the end of the film, he called Alex back here at the church and he said, Alex, I want you to know that we're all in on this movie. And Alex said, well, what does that mean, you're all in? He said, that means you can use this song that you're asking about, and you can use any of the rest of our music. And he said, and what I would love to do is to show it to our parent company, if you're okay with it. And Alex said, well, who's your parent company? And he said, Sony Motion Pictures. And that's how we began a relationship that led to distribution, but it wasn't the way it looked like to start with, but it came because in seasons of prayer, we've learned that we can trust the Lord with these projects, and he can do things that we can't. He can open doors that we can't open. When we got to that point, they said, Sony, they said, we're going to put it in 400 theaters, and we'll put it on DVD all over the world. So it's answering both questions. But then they said, but we've got the highest level guy in North America. He wants to see this film. He's going to go with his family on vacation to Colorado for a skiing trip. And this guy was Jewish. And so he was wanting to watch our little Christian film, sharing the gospel. And so we said, sure, and again began to pray. He went and watched it with his family, and he called back to Alex and said, hey, I watched this film, and our whole family was crying on that skiing vacation. And this is not just 400 screens, this needs to be in 800 screens. And so he doubled the amount of screens and was a key impact in the success of Facing the Giants, because even though he didn't see it, the Lord used him to open up more theatrical release. So it's so many of those stories that I could share with you along the way of just how we've seen God move. But having Larry Frenzel along the way at the very beginning, all of that journey, he was on it with us. Larry, his main role is entertainment attorney. He's working on legal stuff, and I work with him on business affairs. So usually we're together negotiating and reviewing every agreement for music, for movies, for anything involved in it, the distribution of the film. And so along that way, I just want to mention to you, we've met a lot of people in various parts of film, just like some of you are that we talked about earlier. And so an illustration I would just give you is we run into Jack at a film festival, or run into Jack in Atlanta in the airport or some other place, and Jack has been watching films, maybe Christian films, and he believes that it's his life purpose. He's supposed to make film. Jack then gets involved. He starts to write a script, and then maybe gets some other people involved. He starts looking for the funding for his film, and then he starts to realize that, well, I need to have some kind of agreement with these people I'm working with. I need to have an agreement with locations. I need to have agreements. I'm hearing about volunteers, about talent, about music, etc. And then he realized they need that legal help and business help along the way. And so you can't get started early enough with that assistance, because the further you get down the road and realize it, the harder it is to go back and get those agreements in place. I would say along that way too, some of the things that I would point out to you that I would say I think along this journey I've come to find out are very important. And first one I would just mention is pray, and then pray some more. Gather a team of prayer warriors around you that are going to pray for the project. They may not be involved in the business or the production. They're simply people who you know that you can count on for intercessory prayer along your project. We know that John 15:5 says that apart from him, we can do nothing. I also like Ecclesiastes 10:10 says, if your axe is dull and you don't sharpen it, then it works twice as hard. But wisdom can bring success. Is when you stay in the Word and in prayer and seeking the Lord's guidance on these things, then that's the first step in the process, and most important to me, because you will hit roadblocks all along the way. You know, where you're going on the path just like we were going on, and we went out to that studio, but then there was a roadblock and it wasn't quite what the Lord was telling us to do. You know, as an example, we're on the set of Fireproof and we're filming, and we have these prayer teams around production. They're there everywhere we go. They're in pre-production, post-production. At any point when we hit one of those roadblocks, we can call and activate the prayer team, and they're praying specifically about what's happening. We were out in a town that's about 35 miles from here, a little rural town. We're shooting a scene for Fireproof, and Stephen had worked with someone, got this car really damaged, like it had been in a tremendous wreck, and then they put it on the railroad tracks for that scene where the trains come and that car's on the track. Well, after the scene was shot, we needed to move the car, but the car you couldn't roll it. It couldn't move, so it had to be lifted. We got all the guys around, we couldn't lift it. It was too heavy. So the prayer team Stephen gets the prayer team praying. They're praying, and it's in a rural area where the tracks are running right through the middle of the little housing community. And so one of the men that lived in the house next door to the railroad track come walking out there, and he said, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong?" And somebody mentioned that. He said, "Well, you know, I've got a forklift in my backyard." And so how many times you find rural houses with forklifts in the backyard, but the prayer team was praying. And so you're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to have times when you know, something happens and you just can't figure it out. What a great time for the team that you're working with through prayer to see God working. You know, and so what do you think it did for the team on the set that day when that guy walked out and said, "Hey, I got a forklift in my backyard"? You know, there's many opportunities like that that you'll be able to see God at work. 2 Chronicles 16:9 says that his eyes are looking to and fro all over this earth for those whose heart is set on him, that he might strongly support them. And when you're seeking him, you will see him moving mightily, as we have. Also, I'd say second thing, build a team of wise advisors. There's wisdom in many counselors. Proverbs 11:14, where there is no guidance, the people fail, but in abundance of counselors there is victory. Proverbs 15:22, without consultations, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors they succeed. Good and godly people around you who aren't necessarily being paid to be with you on the journey, but who can speak truth into your life, who know you, who can be part of that wisdom group is key for the project. 3, I would encourage you, don't go beyond your team until you've incorporated feedback from others. I run into a lot of people, a lot of times who are going out and they get an audience, maybe with someone close to a studio or somebody that's in distribution, and they unpack their idea and their script early. The group of people who are involved in distribution and in funding of films is a tight-knit community. And so once one of them has seen it, sometimes that word gets around, so everybody has an opinion or an idea about your project before you have really sought wisdom and honed that down to where it's really something that you're ready to present. So I would just encourage you, keep it in your prayer closet and keep it tight with that group of wisdom and investors and the people that are giving you counsel before you take it out to beyond that group. There are a lot of people there that can help in that. There are professional writers, and you may want to engage one of those to take your script to the next level. There's also producers that you can bring in. Some of you are producers, but getting them involved early so you begin, as scripture would say, to count the cost. You know, what's this project going to cost? And sometimes that could mean you're changing the scene or an activity in the film that you had planned to do in order to make it more cost effective. And so all of those things would be good just in your seeking counsel. Also, I would tell you, as you begin to meet people along the journey, people that are going to be maybe a distributor, even your crew and other people on the set, one of the things that we've always asked key talent that we're going to be in any of the films is, if we were to have you involved in this project, is there anything that you know of that would cause God to remove his hand of blessing from this project? You know, we take that very seriously when you're involved, but you're also beyond that. You're interacting with a lot of people. God has given you an idea, and you are a steward of that idea and of that project. And, you know, that's part of what I look at my role, even in what I'm doing with business affairs and in the legal aspect, is I'm trying to make sure that we're the best guardian of and steward of the intellectual property that the Lord's allowing us to steward. But with those people that you meet, I would just say, don't be impressed by money, titles, looks, any of those things with their degrees. There are a lot of people that you're going to go in and you're going to meet, and they might woo you with all of those things. And even the names of big studios. but do be impressed by generosity, integrity, humility, kindness, Christ-likeness. You will know the people when you walk in with those people. If you're praying and you're asking God to show that to you, you will know the right partners when you come into contact with them. We've had that experience many times. We've had people who, even with the most current film that we're working on right now, we run up against a wall, like when I was talking about earlier. We had some people say, no, we're backing away from distribution. And we were almost at the point of signing the agreement. And then that was something that they pulled away from. And we're again wondering, Lord, who's going to be the right person? If you know the theme of the current movie, it's a pro-life movie. It's about adoption and a very encouraging message there. We get to the next person, interview 3 more people for distribution, and we pick up the phone, and here's a gentleman who loves the Lord, has incredible testimony, and he's sharing with us how he has already watched the trailer, passionate about the subject, and his sister has adopted 2 children, just like as in the movie. And just a number of other doors that were open that were not previously open. But this guy had all of those characteristics. You know, he loved the Lord and had a sense of humility about him, and we believe the Lord's led us to the right place for distribution. The other things that I would share with you, and again, I'm here all during the week, so I'm willing to get into the weeds on any of these items related to distribution. But when you get there, you know, some people will make a movie. We were talking earlier, a couple of people who maybe have a finished work. So maybe you have a DVD of your film. Maybe you've already acquired the licenses, but rather than trying to go theatrical, maybe you're just going to sell that DVD. You can do that, and there's plenty of paths for distribution. But if you're going to try to go to a streaming level or a theatrical level, there's a couple of different models that are out there related to that. One model that you would have would be a negative pickup deal. And when you think about a negative pickup deal, negative not meaning that you're not going to make anything off of it. A lot of stuff in the movie world is based off when it started years ago, so negative just referring to the print. But if you went to a negative pickup deal, that would be you as an independent producer. You're making a contract, an agreement with a studio, and with that agreement, the studio is going to give you a set sum to make the movie, and then you'll be responsible for producing the movie and delivering that budget. If you go over the budget, you've got 2 choices. You pay the overage, or you renegotiate with the studio for an increased budget for that film. And so in that, they're going to want all distribution rights to all the different avenues of TVOD, SVOD, all the VODs. They're going to want theatrical, and in return for that negative pickup deal. And in those, with the studio, you've got the deal, you're producing the film, you're delivering the film, and then you split the profits at the end. You know, there's a lot of negotiation and all of that too, in the rights and in those. But that's a negative pickup deal. There are other 2 ways that you can typically fund is through investors. And there, you could have active investors. There are a lot of people out there right now who are actively with hedge funds or investment funds that have been developed because of the success of Christian films, who are taking that money and investing in projects like some of you have that you're looking for investors. With those, you have active investors and you have passive investors. Active investors, an example of that, some of you may know a company, Working Title Association. Working Title Association primarily is a marketing company, but they're owned by EMF, foundation, and they have a fund that they invest in movies. They would be more in the category of active investor because they're going to bring the money to the table, but they're actively involved in the day-to-day movie project because they'll ask for their marketing team to be involved and help with the marketing of the film. You could have someone else who has the funds who've typically operated in a producer role. So again, they may be active because they're bringing the funds, but they also want to be the producer or one of the producers for the project. So an active investor, usually you're not dealing with a whole lot of people. You might have 2 or 3 active investors who are bringing something to the project, and they're working with you during the course of the project. Passive investors typically are a lot bigger number because you're going out to a lot of people. You may be going to your local eye doctor, dentist, used car salesman, other people in your community, maybe a family friend that has the wealth to invest in that. And so with passive investors, they're all contributing, but they're not really involved in the day-to-day making of the movie. And when you get to passive investors, you're also beginning to deal not just with the relationship with the investor, but the relationship with the money and how that money moves. And here in the U.S., the SEC gets very involved when you're dealing with selling of shares and buying of shares and money moving like that. So you'll have a level of legal work that will not only be your operating or producing services agreement with your company, you'll have your agreement with those investors, and you'll have documentation that you'll have to do legally about the money that you're using. Both in active and passive investors, you're paying a pretty good premium for that money. So you may be borrowing that money and dealing with interest rates in the 15 to 20% range. So it's a lot higher investment. Typically, if it's on production, it'll be a little lower. You may be in the 8 to 10, but on the P&A, you'll certainly be back closer to the 20%. And so, but those have a shorter time period, and then you pay that money back with a premium. That's why the golden ticket is back to the negative pickup, because if you're at a negative pickup with a studio, then you'll either have one or two things happen. They will loan you the money for the production, and that's usually prime plus 1 or 2, so a lot lower rate. Or you can be able to take that contract you have with them and go to your bank and borrow at similar rates. Regardless of which one you do, active, passive, negative pickup, all of them are going to want to mitigate their risk by knowing that you have a good script, that you have your talent already in place, your director already in place, you've got your budget outlined, you've got a good business plan. With the business plan, you're going to need it with active, passive, or negative pickup. But again, when you get to the passive investors, there's even more documentation. You get into private placement memorandums and others. So all of that is just touching a little bit of the documentation that's required at distribution. But even when you're in production, when you're at the very beginning and you start working with your team, having your attorney from the very beginning, helping you keep an eye on intellectual property, who's contributing into the project, and what their roles are, as well as even volunteers that come on set have to have documentation. What happens, it doesn't become as apparent until you get to a distribution deal. When you get to with a major studio, or even with some of your smaller ones like with DVD, their attorneys are going to present you with a list that will seem like 50 pages of deliverables, and they will cover every aspect to make sure you've got every right, because the studio does not want to advance you X amount of dollars to make your production and then get all the way down ready for distribution and find out they can't distribute the movie because of some right that wasn't procured. And when you get to where now your movie's out there, you got a website, people are beginning to talk about it, and people are excited about it, and everybody thinks it's going to make $50 million, whether it does or not, it's harder to go back at that point and get those rights for the same price that you would have got if you had been diligent on the front end in getting those. So those are some of the things that I plan to share with you, and I wanted to open up for Q&A if someone has some questions. Yes. If you could speak louder, that will help.
I can't speak.
Okay, I'm listening.
But on the ministry side, could you give a little summary similar to what you just did on the film side? The ministry, how the church is and getting
When we were,
yeah.
when we started with the ministry on the church side, and I think I've got your question.
Or the film,
Yeah, so when we started with Flywheel, Facing the Giants, Fireproof, and Courageous, all of us were on staff here at the church. So every thing was under the authority of the church. And so as the Lord blessed those movies, we took the proceeds from those. If you're here in town this week and you go around to some of the sets that from the previous movie, you'll see when you go out to the field where we shot Facing the Giants, that we built a sports park for the community. We run a recreation league through there that has about 1,200 kids every Saturday, as well as it's open to the community. A lot of churches use it for ministry. We gave gifts to the International Mission Board, to missionaries around the world, equipped about 1,000 pastors through a ministry called Open Eyes in Africa and India, worked with the North American Mission Board to plant churches. So everything that came in, we were pouring that right back out into ministry, because we all signed, one of our legal documents early was that we were all giving of our time, talent, and treasure in order just for the glory of God. So that was a ministry through the church. Then to the broader church, we've tried to make that available. Just Stephen was mentioning earlier in the previous session about what happened in the prisons. We've taken some of those resources as well, both the books that have been published as well as the movies, and use those in prison environments, other environments to help do ministry. And even one after Courageous, Arturo was telling earlier today at lunch about how in Ecuador, in one of the showings, a police chief that watched it was so impacted, came out of the movie, and then that led to a large rally that involved 1,500 police officers from all over the country that came to a stadium where they lined up 50 pastors with 50 tables, and each one of the police officers would come up with their family and sign the resolution and to make that commitment. And so, and a lot of us involved in the project have traveled all over the world sharing the ministry of the movie. And so it's not just been 2 weeks in the theater, but when the movie has the gospel, when the movie has the stacked up holiness that Stephen talked about earlier, they just seem to have a perpetual life and ministry of their own. So, thank you. Hope I got your question, or some part. If not, I will keep going.
Oh, yeah, a little bit, but let's say you have a $1 million, $2 million movie, how much do you set aside to create the books and all the things that, because that's our goal.
Yes.
What do you do on the business side to take care of that, get it ready for it?
Okay. Yes, I think the question is we make movies, how do we set aside and reinvest back into continuing to make movies? That was a question that we had early on, and we prayed about it and looked at how do we keep that going. We were blessed from the very first, after that door opened up to Sony, that every one of those films had a negative pickup deal. And so we never went to the church, ever to the pulpit, and raise funds to make the movies. And every time we came back to the next movie, our studio picked it up with a negative pickup deal. Now, past those movies, as Alex and Stephen are continuing to do movies with War Room, Overcomer, is they're looking for ways to pour back in, just like this festival and other things, to help support ministries that are helping make others make films. And so, we haven't had to set aside as much for the next film. So, yes.
If anyone wants to get a hold of you by email or phone, then we do that.
Yes, if you'd like to get in touch with me by email, my email is first name, last initial, so Jim M at sherwoodbaptist.net. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for all you all have done. You've been an inspiration to so many people. My parents are missionaries in Malaysia, and they actually showed Flywheel at their little secret church there at Father's Day. So I think it's so cool that a movie you made here to be shown in Albany is being shown all the way across the world in a Muslim nation still today. So that's really awesome. For those of us who are at that point, on the very low budget end, what would you say is the number one advice that you would give as we're starting out and just trying to even scrape together anything to make something happen?
The question was, if you're not at the point of a negative pickup deal and you're starting and making a film, what would be the things that you would advise? And I would say, some of the parts I've talked about earlier, the prayer, the wisdom, being willing to accept critical feedback and using that to work for you. We had several times throughout the journey. I remember a lunch we had one time with a young filmmaker in Louisiana, and that person had a family member who had the resources, and so they sat at lunch, back to the points I gave you about what to look for and look for humility. That person, first meeting with Stephen and Alex and I, sat down and told us how we had the worst deals, and they were going to do it and do it right, and had the money to do it. And we gave them some feedback as far as the script and some ideas and some things. But they said thanks but no thanks and did not make any adjustments. And the film was not successful. That's not because of us. That's because of, they were hearing people tell them things they needed to adjust and they weren't. And they were spending too much on the budget. And so things like you're doing here in the networking, looking for ways to shoot the movie or the film in the most efficient way possible, getting the right partnerships along the way, not overspending on the project, and always in life, if you're not so thick-skinned that you're not willing to accept the wisdom of others around you, then I think those are keys to success. Yes, sir.
I have a bunch of questions actually, but the first one is you're getting a negative pickup deal from the studio. That's for all rights worldwide. You're not having to go piecemeal territory by territory overseas. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then
now, again, there are a million variations, so you can have specific things that you carve out of it. Like early on with some of those negative pickup deals, we carved out free TV. We also carved out publishing rights and curriculum because Stephen and Alex both have worked on curriculums and things related to the movies, and we didn't want them drawing that out, writing that. So there are things you can carve out and do yourself, but the best is working with them and then picking it all up.
So you're shooting then, I imagine mostly in Atlanta. Are you also pre-selling your tax rebate and adding that to the budget as well?
We're figuring it in the budget, but it comes out much later. Typically,
so you're not monetizing it ahead of time?
We are. We know how much that would be before we even start shooting, or what we generally speaking think it will be. Most of them, like if you're in Georgia shooting, and it's Columbus, Georgia, that we've shot the last couple films, but when you think about, say, a $4 million budget, the things that are going to qualify for your tax incentive are going to be the dollars you actually spend in Georgia. So, if you're buying your E&O insurance in California, may not qualify. If you're doing post-production in New York, may not qualify. So again, back to all the pre-production work, where you're going to be able to do things, we'll factor all that in. And if we could do it in Georgia and do it with the same excellence, then we may do that because we'll get those tax rebates.
Sure.
But they're sold off at the end. Typically you're through with post-production, you've accounted it all, and then you sell those tax rebates off.
I was also wondering if I could, you mentioned that there are two possible things that can happen if you go over budget. I was wondering how going over budget is possible. Is the studio not putting a bonding agent on your set?
Well, it depends. Again, part of negotiation. If you're a lower budget film, sometimes you can get by without doing the bond, and then the higher the budget, you would have to add a bond. But you could still go over budget versus the initial budget that you turned in. But we've done films with bonds and without bonds.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Being a private investor in two films, I don't feel I'm getting very good feedback from those films as to where things are at. I mean, how do you keep your investors advised on film? I think most people just want to hear something, not go long period hearing nothing. Even if it's a negative, it's nice to hear about it.
You've been the private investor?
I've been a private investor in two films.
Okay.
Both of which I'm not really feeling that I'm getting much feedback. So
Right.
Take advantage of like e-blast. I mean, what do you guys do to keep your investors kind of like, knowing
Right.
what's happening?
Yeah. And so, and then again, I can't speak to your particular situation, but in the ones that I've been involved in, typically if you have private investors, then you have a private placement memorandum, and it requires monthly updates. And so then in those, sometimes they're as simple as post-production continues, and we're beginning to see some great work happening with color correction. So sometimes it could be as simple as a couple of paragraphs, but we do it every month, just so the investor knows what the progress of the film has been. Might be an update on a website or other things, but we just,
Look for that.
but we do it monthly. Okay, yes, sir. Okay. Who?
Right here in the yellow chair.
Okay, there you go.
How much of your budget do you set aside for marketing? What's your marketing strategy?
There again, that thing becomes subjective a little bit. On several, you may have like a $4 million budget and a $1.6 million P&A budget. It gives you a feel. So it varies. And some, again, even with the marketing, there are a lot of groups out there, and we've been doing this for 20 years, and so it seems like that world is continually moving and into different companies. Sometimes you find one group that has all of the elements of the marketing group in one house, marketing house, or either they have connections farm out. Sometimes you might piecemeal that, but it varies. That's an example of one we've done with recent. Yes, ma'am.
I was interested in your comment earlier. You said, I'm paraphrasing, but don't shop your idea too early.
Yes.
But how ready do you have to be? How perfect does the script have to be before you do start shopping it? How much do you have to have it together before you start shopping your movie or your idea?
For us, that comes out of that season of prayer, in that idea. But we also will, inside that tight group of counselors, like say for Stephen and Alex, we've got family members who are close, and so that'll circulate in this tight group. But once we are at that point, we know we're ready to take it out. I'm just saying, if you've got an idea, and I've heard everything from, hey, we had this idea about, and this guy that played, was a kung fu ice fisherman. That was a real one. And they had this ice fisherman who could do kung fu, and it's just a thought. It wasn't even anything in writing. And then you may have somebody who has a paragraph. Is just saying, give some time and effort to work through, so that it doesn't feel half-baked instead of when you get there. Yes.
And second part of that question, and then I'll cede the floor. Do you guys are now established, and I greatly respect you. I echo the comments of the gentleman over there. Thank you for what you all have done, and my heart is with you, and praise God for the projects that you've taken to the world, that He's taken to the world, and used you all as vessels to do so. Now that you're established, do you guys use script doctors every time? And for those of us just getting started, would you use a seasoned script doctor?
We have never used the script doctor.
We've sent the scripts to people who
Hey,
have given us very.
thank you.
I've got my source back here.
That's an excellent source, by the way.
We brought in more support, and we had some friends and stuff, we made a little bit, we came back and gave us feedback. Some of it was the dumpster fire, and some of it really helped. So, you know.
And you have to sift through that, obviously. Okay. But for those of us that are just getting started, would you recommend that?
Are you a writer?
Yes.
Scripture says, surround yourself with a multitude of counselors, and you will have the same success. If you wish that you had the brilliance of 7 people, which we all do, surround yourself with 6 other people in return and seek counsel from them. What I've seen is creatives, you know, they come up with 10 ideas. 8 of them may be reasonable, you know, 2 may be brilliant, and 2 are just dumb. And so you gotta have people around you that love you, that know you.
Right.
Please don't do that. You know, we all have to be encouraged and stuff. So we have seen also that the first version of our movies are terrible. And the first versions of the scripts are just kind of okay.
Yeah.
And so it's that 6,
Editing.
15 version sometimes when it starts shining. And that's the kind of time we'll get honest feedback. You don't surround yourself with young people who just say, oh, it's wonderful, I love it. So that is how you make it better. You appreciate the encouragement, but you need people that can tell you, I hated this, this is stupid, this doesn't make sense, what have you thought about that? You know? So if you're willing to take the feedback and not take it personally or offend it, and you can get a lot done. So,
But we have several
Thank you.
friends who,
Thank you.
in the business, who have hired outside writing help to help with script, and so that those people are out there as well. Yes, sir.
Really, really excited and grateful. So as a young graduate, when I first saw the Face of the Giants, I downloaded the prayer guide. And I just thought if I could just get to Sherwood and model what they do. So I'm grateful to God to be here many, many moons later. To that end, has Sherwood ever considered a pastor's thought incubator for other churches who want to model the Sherwood ministry faith-based film model? Because the question for myself becomes, how do I enroll my pastor, my bishop, who's thinking about resources to go all these other places? They want to build a church. I thought, man, you know what? You can build a lot of ministry from a return on a film. So has there been any thought, or what wisdom could you give us for those that want to see something where they can get in the room, the leaders could talk eagle to eagle? Yes, we can do our part to kind of work with our leadership, but has there been a thought
Yes.
of a question or need, or?
Well, out of that thought, birthed this festival, and Stephen announced his heart to invest in filmmakers in every aspect of the business. I'm coming to you. And so I've had a question around this. It's probably my number one question. Is some person, and I'm not saying this is you, I'm just saying it leads to how it becomes hard. Is I've run into a lot of people who are in some place and their first thought is, I want to do it like Sherwood and I want to go to my church. And sometimes they're thinking that that automatically is going to bring nonprofit status, or that's going to bring all these volunteers. The uniqueness of what happened here was back to Alex, Stephen, myself, and the pastor. We were all employees of the church, and so we weren't in that to make money. We were all under authority. That ultimately the church was in authority over the film, because had we got sued in the early days, it was going to be Sherwood Baptist Church that got sued. Had we had some big theological question, it was going to be Sherwood Church that would be liable. And so a lot of people that I've talked to through the years, when I get to, are you willing to bring your project and your idea and place it in the hands of your pastor? Well, no, I wouldn't quite want to do that. You know, they were wanting to be a part of the idea, but still have control of the idea. And we were all willing to say, none of us are in control, because we're not. Even if, no matter what the scenario, you're not in control. God's in control. But so I haven't seen that model successfully work in another church. But we've had a lot of churches where we've helped people through the festival and others, and they've gone out and they've done work. And when they've called on the churches came beside them and helped with those aspects of volunteers and support for the project. Just haven't seen that replicate that same way. So, yes, sir.
You had a CD that showed the documents that how you made the first 3 films. It had like 67 documents on it. Do you remember producing that? That showed what you guys did, you know, the 4 C's and what you're looking for and all those things. Do you have a similar set of documents? The things you mentioned today are newer than that.
Yes.
Do you have a separate collection of examples of all that?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because the producer of those documents is in the room, and we've had many discussions. We've been working on several other projects, but know that that's something that we need to do to update. Stephen did all the work on that original. Yes. So it's great work, and so we do have a lot of people ask for that.
So many of those documents have now been outdated by professional, movie magic software and other things that are being used that are the new technology and new software that are out there. Right? It really, you guys have some amazing tools that are at your disposal. So it's been interesting though, we've heard multiple movies in the day using the documents. It wasn't always necessarily a church, it was believers that had the prayer support of their church. What Jim was talking about, we have heard some sad stories about churches going, hey, we got creatives, we can make way better movies than you do. And so we're like, and then they come back, and it's been bad, really bad. And so it caused a lot of division stuff in the church. So I would say, in our situation, what Jim just said, it was a very unique situation where God brought together a team of people that he was uniquely calling to do this. In your situation, find if it's open the church, I find out what are the people gifted in your church to do. God may call you to start some unique new kind of ministry that doesn't exist before. And it's, because of the people he sent that are gifted. Don't put on Saul's armor. You do what God calls you to do. With you guys as filmmakers, though, I would say definitely surround yourself with the support of your pastor and other people praying for you. And like Jim said, get a board of counselors around you. Some are smart in business, some are smart in the prayer ministry, some know some things about film that can advise you every step of the way. 80+% of the time you're not going to need them, but there's 5 to 10 to 15% of the time where you need to make a major decision and you're not going to know what to do, and they're going to help you get over the hump and make a good decision.
Yeah.
Thanks again. There was a lot of good information, and I was thinking of that.
Yes. So I think we're running out of time, but I'm going to be up here afterwards, and I'll be available all during the week. And so, again, just as I started, I just want to say again, if there's any good thing that I've been a part of, it's the Lord. And so we give him the glory for all of it. And there's lots of people in this room, so I hesitate to mention one, because there's been so many people looking around the room who have been involved with us on projects and working. But from the beginning, I mentioned Alex, Stephen, myself, and Larry Frenzel from the beginning, but one of the early, if you get a chance to talk to him while you're here, Ben Howard, I know, has walked in the room a little bit late. Ben is a wealth of knowledge in the business and was really key with us in the very beginning with Flywheel and Facing Giants. He was there provident from the very beginning and has been a great friend along the journey. And so, Ben, wave your hand there so they see where you're at. Okay. All right, thank you and God bless you. I'll be up here.